As you can tell from the title of this video, I don't really have too much time to explain anything.
Now that I'm editing, I can explain this concept. As I have mentioned in previous videos, I have the too much gene, and am a hardcore perfectionist. This has prolonged projects and videos, as you can see by my upload schedule. Therefore, I want to get out of my comfort zone and do a 24-hour challenge.
Also, I really like country music, and I use this challenge as a way to make a country western inspired dress.
I want this dress to incorporate the iconic western button-up shirt with a flowy skirt. After drawing it out in Illustrator, my design ended up looking like this.
Since I'm on such a time crunch, I don't really want to go to the fabric store to get fabric, so I'm just gonna...
Oh sheet, I almost forgot to tell you. If you're using a fitted sheet, make sure to tear the elastic off first. This will make it easier to cut out your YEEHAW garment pieces later on. Speaking about making a YEEHAW dress, many ask why they don't say Ha Yi. This is because they would get it confused with the Chinese name Yi, meaning happy, and Ha, meaning mountain hawthorn, which is a small to medium-sized tree that grows fruit. By the way, if you're worried about me making an insensitive joke, I am Chinese, so Ha Yi. Now it's time to cut out your fabric. If you're having difficulty cutting out your bodice, I suggest banging your head on your table a couple of times trying to get your transition correct. That's what I did, and everything worked out.
Now, I need to figure out how to cut out the pieces without a pattern. But they also need to fit me in the way that I want it to. I really think I just need to use my noggin. Ugh, got it.
Just kidding, I used a tape measure and drew on my fabric, but I use my God-given powers of flipping the pieces over so you can't see it. Next, you're going to want to sew your darts. And remember, your anti-dogs can't help you. Wait a minute. After you sew your darts, you're going to want to iron everything down, especially if you're using a sheet. I noticed this fabric wrinkles quite easily, so ironing is imperative. Speaking of ironing, why does Iron Man always have wrinkly clothing? Because he is ironically deficient. Iron pick, isn't it? Okay, I really need to stop, because I'm getting burned by these puns. Now, don't be like Iron Man. Always de-wrinkle your fabric and try not to focus so heavily on the end game. Now, let's sew side seams together. So as to keep viewer attention, here's an anti-dog cam. I don't know about you, but I think this clip is awfully amusing. I'd say that last pun was clawsome, but I think I would get catitude from the people watching. Moving on to the collar, you'll want it to look like this. First things first, you'll bang your head once more to get your collar and collar stand pieces.
Ugh, got it.
I highly suggest using the measuring tape for this one to get an accurate neck measurement. Take your weirdly shaped rectangle piece and sew the top and sides, leaving the bottom open. After this, cut your edge pieces to get a nice, clean seam, then flip it inside out and sandwich this in between your two collar stand pieces, sewing this in place, making sure both interfacing and face fabric are on grain. Get it? Sandwich? Grain?
It is officially 4:38 a.m., which means that I've been sewing this dress for about 12 hours, give or take a couple of meals and stuff, but now I'm just going to be sewing the collar directly on to the bodice.
After this, double sandwich your finished collar to your bodice and step back, thinking about how intense a double sandwich is. Now comes the arm tubes, which get a little complicated, so keep an open mind up your sleeve. When cutting out the sleeves, depending on how much you want to gather or pleat, cut a big sleeve cap and big wrist measurement. Then cut two rectangles the size of your wrist with 2-inch ease, plus another 1/2 inch for your buttons or snaps. Next, sew the arm seam and gather or pleat your sleeve cap to finesse them into your armholes. Then you're going to want to cut this weird house-looking piece of fabric out and follow the instructions of my voice. First, cut the length you want your placket to be, and then sew 1/4 inch around this cut and proceed to turn everything inside out. You'll then want to sew the smaller side by folding it over once and then again. For the house part, make sure you fold the fabric in a way so there is an overlap with the smaller side, and then top stitch all this down. After some suffering and finessing, my plackets turned out like this, but later on I found out they weren't necessary, so I suggest skipping this part if you want to save on brain cells. Remember to also sew the sides of your cuff and gather them as well to fit along the edge where your placket is connected, aka the wrist area. Then sew everything down, making sure to top stitch and serge your seams.
This is what the bodice is looking like so far, and now we're just going to be attaching the sleeves.
When this is all said and done, pleat the top of the sleeve cap and sew it into the armhole. After all of this, my bodice was looking like this, and I debated stopping and just making this a crop top video because I was getting quite tired at this point, but I persevered. Next is a skirt. I tried to cut this out on my floor for lighting purposes, but I ended up having a really difficult time cutting it out on carpet. Plus, I didn't have sufficient space, so I had to cut it off camera. It ended up being a simple half-circle skirt, so if you remember, apple pies are square, cherry pies are too, you can get your waist radius and draft it out from there. Also, remember to interface your placket to give it some nice support to accommodate for your snaps. Then, sew everything down. For the placket, I end up folding over 1 inch and folding over another inch to give as much support as possible. Since this is a bed sheet, it was quite flimsy and thin. Next, I sewed my hem. A helpful hint is to put down a basting stitch and then fold over your fabric once and then again, then top stitching everything nicely. Lastly, you'll want to put snaps or buttons on your placket. I normally just measure it out with a ruler and poke holes, but you can draft it out before if it helps. By this time, the sun was about to come out, so I went outside to film it. After about an hour and a half, I realized the clouds were blocking the sun and it wouldn't actually rise, so here's my version of a sunrise. I immediately got back to work because at this point I was actually suffering and my body started to ache, so I finished up the snaps and went to bed.
It's officially 8:46 a.m. and it's time to go to sleep. Good night.
Subscribe, noob! Is that good? That was good. Yeah. Yeah.